Have you ever witnessed something so bizarre that your brain refused to process it? That's how my personal trauma began. I work in a regular office, gray walls, boring reports, coffee that was probably brewed during the Great Depression. Among us is a guy named Tom. At first glance, he's just a normal employee, suit, tie, carefree smile, but one day I noticed something indecent. Before a meeting started, while everyone was still sorting through papers and checking emails, Tom did something absolutely unbelievable. He leaned forward, rolled up his shirt sleeve, stuck out his tongue, and licked his armpit. I froze. My eyes refused to believe what they had just seen. He did it quickly, casually, as if he was just adjusting his tie. But here's the thing. It wasn't the first time. I looked around, hoping for someone else's reaction, but everyone kept going about their business as if nothing had happened. Did I imagine it? Was the coffee too strong today? But no. Tom straightened up, adjusted his sleeves, and nodded to himself as if he had just checked the balance of the universe. Then he sat down as if nothing had happened. I felt reality cracking at the seams. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a ritual. I needed to know more. After that first time, I convinced myself it was some kind of one-off anomaly. Maybe he got lost in thought and did it absent-mindedly. Maybe I was going crazy. But the next day, before the same meeting, Tom did it again. Rolled up his sleeve, quickly ran his tongue over his armpit, nodded to himself, and sat down like nothing happened. I looked at my colleagues. Not a single soul reacted. A creepy feeling washed over me. Had the entire office conspired to ignore this? Or was I the only one who could see it? At the third meeting, I deliberately sat closer and kept a close watch on Tom. Bingo, raised his arm, licked, nodded. But this time, I noticed something even more disturbing. He rolled his eyes as if experiencing a moment of pure, genuine pleasure. This time, I couldn't hold back and muttered under my breath, What the? Next to me, Sarah from marketing turned her head slightly and whispered, "You noticed?" I slowly turned to her. "You knew?" Sarah shrugged as if I had just asked whether she had seen the weather forecast. Of course, everyone knows. That's when it truly hit me. Everyone knows? I looked back at Tom. He was jotting down notes in his notepad as if he hadn't just performed an act worthy of a dedicated episode of conspiracy theories. "And no one finds this weird?" Sarah sighed. "Oh, man. Welcome to hell." Sarah crossed her arms and leaned in closer, lowering her voice as if we were discussing a state secret. "We don't talk about it." I blinked. "What?" "His habit. We just don't bring it up." My eyes nearly popped out of my skull. "Wait. He licks his own armpits before every meeting, and you guys just stay silent?" Sarah shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Yep. It's easier than dealing with the consequences." "Consequences?" Sarah quickly glanced around, checking if anyone else was listening, then leaned in even closer and whispered conspiratorially, "Once, a new guy asked him about it." I leaned in too. And the next day, he quit. A cold chill ran down my spine. Tom. Scared him off. Sarah shook her head. "No, he just explained." I didn't know what was worse. The thought that Tom had somehow broken a man with just words, or the fact that I now had an unbearable urge to find out what he had said. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder. "Seriously, don't get involved. Just don't think about it." But that was no longer an option. I had to know the truth. I tried. I really did. I tried to ignore it. But once you've seen a grown man lick his own armpits before a business meeting, your brain will never function normally again. The entire office had accepted it as normal. They had simply turned a blind eye. But I had one question that was driving me insane. Why? So, at the next meeting, I made up my mind. When Tom finished his ritual, sat down and opened his notepad, I leaned forward slightly and said, "Hey, Tom, can I ask you something?" The entire room went silent. Tom slowly lifted his head. I felt dozens of eyes locking onto me. Sarah, sitting beside me, gripped my elbow so hard I swear she was trying to send me a telepathic message through my bones. "You just signed your death warrant, you idiot." But I had already started. There was no turning back. "You, I swallowed. Should I ask directly? Make it sound like a joke? How do you even approach a question like this? "You lick your armpits before every meeting." B-A-M. That was it. I said it, like throwing a grenade into the room and waiting for the explosion. Tom didn't blink. He just smiled. "Of course," he said calmly. "It's tradition." The hairs on my neck stood on end. "Tradition. Yes. And now that you've asked—" Tom shut his notepad and leaned toward me slightly. "Now you have to hear the explanation." The room remained deathly silent. For some reason, I suddenly wanted to run the hell out of that office. I wasn't breathing. No one in the room was. Tom leaned back in his chair, interlocked his fingers, and calmly looked at me. "You've noticed that our meetings always go smoothly, haven't you?" I blinked. "What?" "Our meetings. They always go without a hitch. No shouting, no conflicts, no delays. We always finish on time. Always." I glanced around the room. Everyone was staring at the table. Sarah had covered her face with her hands. Okay, that's just a coincidence, right?" Tom smirked. "No." Something tightened inside me. "I don't understand." He leaned forward. "It's because of me." I swallowed hard. "Tom, are you saying that your armpits keep the office from falling into chaos?" "Exactly. That's when I lost it." "Oh, come on. This is just, well, damn, it's weird. Why would you even—" "I didn't choose this. It chose me." "Jesus. What the hell?" "When I first started working here," Tom continued, his eyes gleaming with eerie satisfaction, "the office was a nightmare. People were constantly arguing. Projects kept failing. Management was threatening layoffs. Complete chaos." I said nothing. And then one day, in a moment of extreme stress, his eyes glowed with something unsettling. I accidentally licked my armpit before a meeting. I grimaced. "And you know what happened?" I shook my head. Tom smiled. "The meeting went perfectly." Shit, shit, shit. "You're telling me this is some kind of ritual?" Tom didn't blink. "I call it balance." I gulped. "And if you stop doing it—" He was still smiling. "Do you want to find out?" Cold sweat trickled down my back. No one in the room dared to look at me. I had broken the rule. And now I was about to learn the truth. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just some joke or a weird habit. It was something more. Tom wasn't just licking his armpit like some eccentric lunatic. He truly believed it worked. And what the hell did I do? I stepped right into his game. After Tom finished his monologue and the office settled back into its usual routine, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I felt like I was uncovering a mystery no one wanted to solve. Or maybe they simply couldn't. The next day, as we gathered for another meeting, I felt a strange excitement. I knew this was madness, but what if he was right? What if this bizarre ritual was the glue holding our team together? I tried to focus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I finally understood. Tom was like a sorcerer, and his ritual was magic. And then I realized I had to do something. I couldn't let this continue without testing it myself. I waited for Tom to perform his usual ritual, already preparing the question in my head. What if I try it myself? And then the moment arrived. Tom did his thing, tilted forward, licked his armpit, nodded to himself, and sat back up. His eyes gleamed once more. I wished myself luck and glanced at the clock. And then, as if answering my silent challenge, Tom suddenly said, "You know, if you want, you can try it too. You're already on the edge, aren't you?" Something inside me flipped. Every eye in the room was on me. Sarah gripped my elbow again, but this time I was ready. ready to see what happened if I stepped into this world of insanity. What the hell was I supposed to do? I stood there, frozen in time, as his words crashed down on me. Everything around me stopped. The faint smell of coffee, the rustling of papers, even the occasional snicker. It all disappeared, as if reality itself had paused. Only Tom, me, and this ridiculous idea remained. I swallowed hard, and it was worse than any public humiliation, because I knew that if I said anything now, I'd forever be the guy who asked the question. It was like opening a door to a forgotten room, knowing I'd never get out again. But Tom was dead serious. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't joking. He was 100% convinced. And, what was even scarier, it seemed like he was waiting. I looked around the room. People sat at their desks, frozen like zombies. Everything was eerily calm, like in a foggy dream, and only Tom was staring at me like a mentor watching his student take a final test. And, honestly, I couldn't stop myself anymore. "All right," I said, raising my arm slightly. "Let's see what this is about." Sarah and a few others exchanged glances. Their faces showed more relief than concern. They had expected this. They knew it was inevitable. I was merely being initiated into their strange little cult. Tom nodded, his eyes gleaming. "You won't regret it," he said. "You'll see how everything falls into place." I took a deep breath, lifted my arm, pulled up my sleeve, and, as ridiculous as it sounds, I took the step. I pressed my tongue against my skin, and at that moment, I felt— what? The world shrank. A strange, warm sensation washed over me. Everything became clear, sharp, as if some heavy curtain over my perception had been lifted. It was like breathing deeply for the first time after a long suffocation. Tom watched me with a satisfied smile, like an old master who had just opened a hidden path in a labyrinth. He was pleased. I felt the people around the table lean forward as if something was truly shifting. "You feel it?" Tom asked, never breaking eye contact. I didn't know what to say, but damn, I did feel something. Something strange, yet right. Like the entire office had just clicked into place. Every word, every glance, every detail, everything was where it belonged. "Shit, this works," I muttered, barely believing my own words. Tom smiled, like a teacher explaining the universe to a clueless student. "Now you understand. This isn't just nonsense. This is balance." But as it turned out, it wasn't over yet. This was only the beginning. When I took that final step and the world shifted, I realized I had opened not just a second door into this strange, unsettling office, but also disturbed something ancient. It was like running a finger across an old book binding, feeling the imprint of forgotten words. Everything became clear. Meetings ran perfectly. I felt the atmosphere in the room change, how people started seeing each other in a different way. I could sense them syncing up, an eerie, almost unnatural unity. And with each passing day, the consequences grew stranger. Management took notice. Our department became ridiculously successful. We received bonuses, praises, and, most disturbingly, rewards we never even dreamed of. I, like everyone else, stayed silent about the ritual. I avoided questions because, truthfully, even I didn't understand what was happening. Then, one day, I realized I wasn't alone. I started noticing tiny movements, subtle, almost imperceptible gestures from my colleagues. The same restrained tension in their arms, the same glances, as if they were waiting for something. Something was in the air, and it made me uneasy. Sarah whispered to me one day as we sat together at the table. "You noticed, right? It's not just you and me." I turned to her, my spine tingling. "What do you mean?" "It's not just Tom. It's all of us now." And that's when I knew. I wasn't just part of this bizarre world anymore. I was bound to it, and nothing would ever be the same again.